Hey, it's the Road Show, back this time with Dan and Alan. Dan, I'm going to get to see you here in a couple days. You're coming down for Pikes Peak International Hill Climb.
Yeah, super excited about that. It's going to be a lot of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Lindsay's coming down as well. Alan will be at Goodwood.
I'll be in England with FOMO and wishing I was with you guys. But Goodwood will be amazing.
Yeah, it will be fantastic. I think that FOMO goes both ways. It's been a hell of a busy couple of weeks. I was just telling you guys before we got on, I'm involved with the Colorado Grand, and each year I write the car descriptions for the route book, which is a lot of work because the cars, they change, right? It's not final until it's final, right? Till right before, and participants change and details of the cars change and all that. So it's like a seasonal project, right? It takes from now to September basically, and just started getting that stuff in today. So I enjoy doing it. I very much enjoy being a part of the Grand, but it is a lot of work, and I am not Mr. Organization, so there's like that added layer of complication for this guy at least. But yeah, can't wait to see you for Pikes Peak. It's hope the weather's okay. I was checking out the weather. Looks like maybe some storms this week, but you're on the top of a mountain. You never really quite know what you're gonna hit, but I'm looking forward to that. There's the Porsche Colorado Springs driver meet this coming Wednesday night, which is always a great time. You're not going to make that, but I'll be there, and I look forward to that. I just got back from, I think this is my very first automotive press trip, and I don't know if either one of you have ever done anything like this in your past experiences, but this was first time I'd done anything quite like this, and this was really interesting. So I want to give a shout out to the Rocky Mountain Automotive Press, RMAP on Instagram. They do a thing each year. It's called the RMDE. I think it's the Rocky Mountain Driving Experience, and what they do is they bring in all these car manufacturers, some OEMs, some fleet managers, and then we get to drive from this fleet of cars. And this year there were about 16 or 18 cars, everything from a Fiat 500e electric to 370Z Nismo to the Genesis. What is it? The GV60, the big SUV. This
BBAC,
Lexus, it was so a little bit of everything. Nothing too exotic. I mean, there was a Miata RF, which was the only manual transmission car on the trip, which was, I think, probably the crowd favorite. I got a big kick out of because Cheba Cheta, the longtime editor of Car and Driver magazine, was along for the trip, and I always talk about if my 12-year-old self could see me now, and this was very much one of those moments. If my 12-year-old self knew that I would someday be on a press drive with Cheba Cheta, I would have thought that was pretty cool. And hell, I thought it was pretty cool at age 48. But really neat experience because we met here in Denver. We each picked a car. We actually drew a car. My leg was in the new Subaru Forester, so shout out Chuck at Subaru. That was a great package, all-around package, but with 180 naturally aspirated horsepower, probably not quite enough for what I would want in Colorado. But that was that's where I dipped my toes in the pool. And then again, we got to drive everything from the new Tacoma, which really impressed me. Again, lots of electric cars. The one car, I posted this on Instagram, the one car I drove and then I immediately came home and built out on a configurator was the Land Rover Defender. This was a 110 in what they call a county livery, which is this Heritage, the two-tone, kind of like a Bronco, white steel wheels. And what I've been telling everyone is I hadn't driven a new Defender yet. And it drives exactly like my parents' Discovery 2 25 years ago, like for better or worse, right? You can't have that level of off-road capability, I guess, without giving up something on the road. I mean, Alan, you know more about this than either of us, and that's the trade-off. But what a thing! Like, what just like a, of all the cars, it probably had the most personality, if you want to call it that.
It's appealing to all demographics, I think.
Yeah.
Like obviously us remembering the old one and understanding what it's capable of.
Yeah.
And then also my 21-year-old son. He's a big fan of it. That's on his, wish list. So that's cool that they managed to keep that image going. Yeah.
Yeah. It one of the things we did get to do on this trip was actually take the cars off road, drive through some creeks and this kind of thing up near Frisco, Colorado, which was very cool. And that was one of the cars I drove on that leg. It's just felt like the right vehicle for that, right? Like the whole lineup, and we had a new Ram full-size truck, and this the Lexus, the TH550H Plus. I'm not quite sure what the plus means, but that's this hybrid full-size SUV that they have. But it was the Defender that just looked like it was, the right one there, right, for that
So
kind of duty.
there were 18 cars. That's a pretty cool couple
Yeah, it was
of days.
pretty cool. Yeah, it was pretty great. And to be able to drive them back to back to back, there's some things that really jumped out, in some of these cars. It was nice to actually drive some cars too, right? I mean, everything's been SUV, crossover. There was this really wonderful Acura, the TLX, the Type S, which is this like 355 horsepower all-wheel drive, like it's a car. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like
Amazing.
it's like, I think they said the 3 Series is a competitor. It seemed a little larger than that. Just a nice thing to drive. But yeah, what a variety. Nothing too exotic. There was a Mercedes EQE. Do you guys know about the EQE?
Yep.
That was a different kind of thing.
Well, did it meet expectation, or do you think
so you have to be careful here, but it would not be the car that I would buy for myself.
Yep.
It was a nice device, but didn't have some of the driving. I don't know the what's the word I'm looking for. It wasn't the driver's car, right? That some of the others were. And I also thought that in some of the premium brands, and I won't name names, but I thought like you get into the car and some of the fit and the finish wasn't quite where you'd expect it to be for these brands. And I would get in these, like the Genesis, right? We had this this Genesis GV80. You get in and you smell the leather. You smell, right? I mean, the wood is nice, right? And another thing about the Genesis is that I think it's the same screen that's in the Genesis that then you'll find in the Hyundai, and then you'll find in the Kia as well. And so that I thought was really interesting too, the carryover between. And Alan, I mean, you can talk more about that, I guess, but it's just there's a lot of shared componentry, right? Which I noticed, which was interesting.
There is sort of throughout, and it's a lot of money to develop your in-car system. So if you can share that amongst the family of products, it's a massive save for sure. And yeah. And you go back to your comment about the Defender. Obviously, it's an off-road vehicle, so it has to have lots of wheel travel and articulation. And going back to my days at Rivian, that's why we had a kinetic system, so you could try and manage getting 2 cars out of one, a capable off-road car and a sturdy on-road experience as well. So yeah, but that's a complex.
And that was
system.
Rivian's way of doing that, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you were doing that with Rivian, did you bring in competitors' cars and benchmark against them?
Maybe.
Can you not talk about that?
I don't know. Yeah, everyone does. Everyone brings in, what they think is their sort of target audience, and just learn from them and understand. And it's interesting because you never go, right, we want to match exactly that. It's, well, we want the steering feel from this one, we want the ride quality from this one, we want the perceived quality from that one, and try and get what you think is right for your brand or audience.
One of the things that I've talked about with you guys before is with electric cars, how do you differentiate one make from the next, right? Like, and one of the things I really took away from this is driving several electric vehicles back to back is that each one had its own personality. And I think that was a fear of a lot of people, right? Like, these are all going to be skateboards basically, right? It was going to be, in the coach building, if you want to call it that, or the fit and the finish. And like, for example, the Subaru, the Solterra was an interesting car because it had one of these square steering wheels, which I thought I was going to hate. But it actually worked just fine. Didn't think about it once I was behind the wheel of the car. But that had its own personality, right? I mean, that, it's kind of this lifted, it's got black plastic cladding and stuff, and I don't know. It was just, I think that I've laid that fear to rest, right? Like, I think, and again, know more about this than either of us. How do you bake in personality into an electric vehicle? Because Rivians have personality in spades, so.
Yeah, it was a big effort to try and it sort of finds its way into everything when you want to truly do it deeply and position a brand like Rivian. When you look at some of the other OEMs, it gets a little bit trickier because they're trying to recycle a lot of parts, reuse a lot of parts, and it becomes even harder to get that personality. So it's almost being driven by size. Is it a two-seater? Is it a four-seater?
Yeah.
Is it a five-seater? Is it a seven-seater? That almost becomes a distinguishing thing more so than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, do you have much experience with electrics?
Driven a few.
Yeah.
I've driven the Rivian. I love the Rivian.
Yeah, I do too.
My buddy lent me the Rivian. It was very cool. I drove one of the early Jaguars. That was interesting because it was one of the first electric cars, like mainstream and also luxury. It was nice, but there was no way I was going to swap the keys for one of my regular cars.
Yeah. Was that the F-Pace? Or what is that? I-Pace. Sorry, I-Pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Porsche gave me a Taycan for the weekend.
Yeah.
I was writing for the Porsche magazine, the Spiel, the local magazine, and I managed to score a Taycan for the weekend and a credit card. So I didn't have to pay for any of the charging. The one I had was the rear-wheel drive one.
Okay.
So it's like the bottom of the
Sure,
run, if you will. Amazing cars, but it's the same size as a Range Rover. So, do you want a four-door, luxury car that's the same size as a Range Rover? There's, and not necessarily the same amount of space.
Right. By the way, Spiel is the greatest name for a PCA magazine ever. I just think that's great.
I don't know who thought of it.
Dan, that's a thing I picked up on several cars. There were several cars that seemed big on the outside and not so big on the inside. Even cars that I liked, like this Acura. It was like the size of a 5 Series BMW on the outside, but like a 3 Series, or maybe what used to be a 3 Series on the inside. The Solterra surprised me because it doesn't seem like a big car, a small car on the outside, but it seems like a smaller car on the inside. My benchmark is this 2017 Tiguan back here was definitely less space than that, right? I mean, it just seemed a little tight. The one that really surprised me, and this is a car I wanted to absolutely love because I love the heritage nods. I love that it exists, but the 370Z Nismo, that had a tighter interior than the Miata. And that really surprised me because it's a significantly larger car than the Miata.
But what was the driving experience like? Did it
325 horsepower, I think, so pretty good power. It's it was quick. It was not a manual. I guess none of the Nismo cars are manual, all automatics. It looked great. It was this sort of gray color with gold wheels. It was had some colored headlights. A very pretty car, but it just didn't really. I would take the Miata, the keys to the Miata, whenever I could over the Z. I wanted to love it, and Dan, I know you spent some time in a Z, a new car.
Yeah,
now, this was the Nismo. I don't know. Maybe the seats were more bolstered or something. It just wasn't as comfortable as I remember it being. But
I got hold of the press car. So when the first one came out, the Z, it was a manual, and it was a bright yellow press car. And it was interesting. I think the first thing when you get into Japanese cars, the interiors just aren't the same as you would expect from, maybe that Land Rover or a German car.
yeah.
For me, it pegged with a Miata, obviously with a little bit more performance, but it wasn't a $50,000 car, which is, I think, what they retail for.
Well, this was $68,000, and that's that's real money, as they say, right? I mean, there's so many options at $68,000. I think that's what would stop me. I'd want the manual. They have something called the performance model, which I think maybe that's the sweet spot. I think that's probably closer to the figure you just gave. But $68,000 that's a lot of car. That's a lot of car. And honestly, and you mentioned the Miata. This was the RF, so this was like sort of the Targa top, which may be the one to get. Not a powerful car, but great light controls, right? And I was smiling in that car. I was laughing in that car. It's all the things that all the car journalists have said since that car, the inception of that car in the NA way back in '89 or whatever. It's just the controls are light. You can explore the limits. The Z car, it was too serious. It took itself too seriously. It wanted to be a Porsche, right? But Porsche does a better job of being a Porsche, right? The Miata was and for a fraction of the price, right? I'm sure less than half the cost, or about half the cost of the Z car. Was just a third of the power, less than half of the power, but just a much more pleasant experience. To bring a smile to your face like that, to actually make you laugh, right? That's a rare thing. and the Miata did it, in the first, 30 seconds. And
And I
unfortunately,
think
the Z just
what I
never
like
did.
about that, because the Miata has been car of the year in so many countries for so many
Yeah.
magazines for so many years. They've got that formula right, and it
Yeah.
shows that it doesn't have to be big wings, big tires, big engine. Obviously, that's great and it has its place, but it's about, just having fun, bang
Yeah.
for your buck. I love that
Yeah.
saying. It's just got the formula right, hasn't it? So
It does.
There's rumors coming out that Toyota are going to create a competitor to it. So imagine if they put the Corolla GR engine in a soft top. That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
the
Yeah, but
e-bikes.
where would the BRZ, the twins, the 86, where would that fit in then?
I think it's that soft top thing, right?
Yeah,
So
is
I
that
think
the,
it's in between
yeah.
the two, maybe.
So
But they can see the market's there for it, right?
yeah. I always thought it was odd that they didn't do a cabriolet with the 86 twins, but, that Miata is interesting though, because the limits are so low, right? And I'm used to driving the GT4 and you can pretty much, it'd be very easy to, I guess, I don't want to say get into trouble because it's very predictable and all that. But the one superpower of that car that no one talks about is you are absolutely invisible to cops. And I was hustling it around this reservoir up in Frisco, and I think I had, I don't know, Brendan from Shift Colorado magazine behind me in the Z car, so I was on it, and came above a crest, and there was a cop, black and white, sitting on the side, and I think it was 35 miles an hour. I was probably doing 65 or 68. Put the brakes on,
Apparently.
everything else. He didn't even notice me. He didn't even notice me.
Yeah.
It's just I could have been in a silver Tiguan for that matter. So, that would not. If I had been in my GT4, I would have been pulled over immediately doing that same
Yeah,
speed.
for sure.
So,
Yeah. What about the Z
but
car behind? Did he get busted or
he didn't because he saw my brake lights.
right?
and I don't think I don't think anyone ever got into any sort of trouble or whatever. But the guy could have been taking a nap for all I know. But came that close and nothing. So. But really interesting driving, this cross section of cars. I mean, this is a pretty good cross section of what Americans are driving, I think. A Camry, right? Who knew the new Camry was a pretty good car, right? Good power, this kind of thing. Never been a pickup truck guy, but the Toyota Tacoma, the new one, the appealing package. I mean, it's that or that maybe the Outback is the state car or state vehicle forerunner of Colorado. I get it. They're just good vehicles, right? And especially the new one has gotten rid of some of those old school, things that, for all their charm, didn't make for a very good modern automobile.
I used to do some testing with Rivian at a test track where Toyota spent a lot of time and talking with, and we've used some of their test drivers as well and employed some over time. And the Toyota range of pickup trucks are really good. Like
Yeah.
you've got that Toyota build quality, and it's a really well American engineered truck as well. So
Yep.
yeah, I wouldn't be shy of, if I was in the truck market, buying a Tacoma. Yeah.
Not one rattle, not one squeak. I mean,
exactly.
it just
It's a great vehicle.
good looking too. Good look. Either of you ever owned a truck of any variety, like a pickup truck, much less a full size pickup truck? Has this ever even been on your radar as something you might want to own?
I've had a Ute in Australia,
Okay.
a Ford Falcon Ute, but in England, pickup trucks aren't a thing because the weather is crap.
Yeah.
You can't put things in the back because it'll get stolen. So and the roads are too
I
narrow.
thought that was just
so-
Denver, Alan.
no. No. So
The nearest I've got to it is I rented one of those Jeep Gladiators. And it was fun, but the thing handled, a regular Jeep doesn't handle well, but a Jeep Gladiator where you've got no weight over the back, but this bed. Yeah. But it was a fun car to rent.
That's an odd vehicle because it's relatively narrow and it's so long, right?
Yeah.
It's just, I imagine the handling is weird. I've never driven the Gladiator, but the one that really surprised me was Stellantis was there and they brought their new full-size Ram truck, which I think is all new. That had probably the best ride of any vehicle at this event,
Really?
which shocked me.
Wow.
It's got air suspension, which,
yeah, haywire.
I don't know if I'd want to own it out of warranty. Of course, it isn't a Land Rover, right? But just a shockingly quiet and smooth ride. I mean, it was definitely on the level of the Lexus, right? And maybe even a better ride. I kind of get the appeal. Like, it's just not me. Like, I wouldn't, that would be so weird if I rolled up to a friend's house in a big, like, Ram full-size truck. They'd wonder what happened to me. But I absolutely see the appeal. The back seat was like a 750 IL, but wider, right, for Americans, right? Like, it was like a first class, you know, seat on a plane or something on an international flight. It was just absolutely massive, but drove really, really well. Just wouldn't, you know, bat an eye at anything. But the ride was just incredible. Like, that might, of all these vehicles, that might be the one I'd want to like drive across the country. It was that good.
I've had a few Ram pickup trucks when I've been in the US, say with my son doing some dirt biking, so he can get a rental, put dirt bikes in the back. But they maybe it's just a different spec that it's a rental because they do build different versions for rental companies. So it probably wouldn't be on the top of my list, but I'd love to experience you know, a better appointed and maybe a different spec truck.
I'm wondering I'm wondering if this air suspension is just, you know, on the higher level trims. You know, I'm guessing it probably is.
Maybe.
But that was to me the selling point. You know, if it wasn't for that, you know, maybe it would have been a little less impressed. You know,
Did you find your personality change depending on which vehicle you're in? Because I used to have access to a Raptor when I was in California for a while. And I found I was a different person when I was driving the Raptor. So
turned you to addicted.
I capped on backwards and shout at people. So
this was no Raptor, you know, and I mean that in the best way. You know, this actually was almost like a calming experience, right? It was not high strung. It was just very much a very chill, you know, I don't know, family vehicle, right? If you want to, you almost would forget you were in a pickup truck, right? I guess it was kind of like that. A Raptor, I think I could see that changing my personality, you know. And that's a good point, Alan.
Jump everything.
Well, that right. I mean, how can you not, right? You're driving an RC car, you know. I mean, it's just it's interesting because when you drive these cars back to back, you realize there's just some of these you wouldn't buy because of image, right? You know, I mean, they don't line up with who you think you are, which is interesting. Right? We all want to think we're Defender people.
Yeah. Do you think the Ram? Do you think the Ram is upping its game over time? Like, I remember there's a comedian on Instagram, Steve. I can't remember his last name actually. He was saying who drives what pickup truck, and people said, "Oh yeah, I drive a Ram," and he went, "Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have enough money." So I don't know. Is that a reputation that they have out there, or?
That's, you know, I don't know so much. I don't like. I've never really thought about like breaking down the demographics.
I don't think we've got any Ram pickup truck listeners, so you know, you could be
right. It's It's interesting. Yeah. I've not been in a lot of full size pickup trucks. You know, I have a buddy that's got a newer Ford truck. This seemed to be just a better truck, honestly. You know, maybe they are. Maybe they're putting, because I feel like the Ram was kind of old. It felt old, right? It felt a half step behind some of the competition for a long time. I gotta say, I think if I were going to buy a full-size pickup truck, it might be a Toyota like that. Yeah. That might be where, you know, because you're buying into the dealer network and all that too, right?
For sure.
But to your original point, yeah, maybe they are putting some money into it, trying to, you know, make it, you know, bring it up to speed. But and if so, they've done a great job, because I was shocked at just what a good vehicle it was, right? And that ride in particular just made it.
Well, I look forward to hearing all the reviews on your Instagram. I see you walking around in front of the camera, looking like you know, a Top Gear presenter. So maybe you put a new career ahead of yourself.
Well, it's funny, you know, they'll give you the cars, but then, you know, there's this implied agreement that you're going to create some content with it too, right? So, you know, it's, I told Alan this, I said, I saw myself on the First Dibs podcast the other night, and that night I ordered an elliptical machine for myself, you know, doing the steering committee. I mean, no one can ever see us, you know, faces for radio. Now we're out there, right? Now we're out there. Anyway.
Can you order us ellipticals as well, or at least me?
What's that?
I think I need an elliptical as well.
Oh, well.
If you could find a way you can buy one, get one free, let me know.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I think the real workout was in bringing the box around the house, all 140 pounds of it, to the garage, and then, you know, putting the thing together. That was the real workout. I'm afraid it's going to just turn into a nice place to set my car wash towels or have them dry out in time. But it was, I got to mention a couple more of the cars that we drove that really impressed me. The Kia K9. This is the Kia EV9. The K9 is the sedan. The EV9 is the big SUV that's fairly new. A lot of people have been waiting for this thing. It's
That's quite a sort of boxy.
It is.
Looking, yeah, there's quite a few
Yeah,
here
and
in
this
the UK as well, actually.
really,
So,
it's a big vehicle for the UK.
it is, and it looks like a big vehicle on the road as well. So.
Yeah, it was a big vehicle here, but this was the GT or the Sport line or whatever, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds.
That's a lot of truck moving fast.
It is, but a very good vehicle. Definitely one of the higher up cars on my list of something that I would buy. Again, I'm a Kia person. I don't know. I think the image of Kia is changing, obviously. But that surprises me a little bit that they're popular in the UK because it's a lot of vehicle. I mean, it's like a Tahoe size.
Yeah, I don't know why it's so successful. I wouldn't have expected the styling to work here, the size, but it seems to, they seem to strike a chord with people. And
interesting.
I think the quality is there, the value for money must be there, the warranty is there already. So it's if you're after a family, I wouldn't say a commuter, but something that ticks all the boxes, then for the most family buyers. Yeah, it's probably a good option, to be fair. So I don't know if they're offering some good finance deals or something as well. But
it's a very compelling product, and I think one of the things that's not mentioned about the Kia Electrics is they actually drive pretty well. Like the driving dynamics are there. You as an engineer would appreciate this. There was another car on the trip, the Honda Prologue, which is I think their first all-new electric crossover, if you want to call it that. I think it looks pretty good. It was designed in California. I think it shows a lot, it's a Honda, so a lot of hard gray plastic and this kind of thing. Great package, great family vehicle. In fact, I might even prefer the looks of it over the Kia, but the EV9 definitely drove better. It was more of an enthusiast's drive, if that makes sense. So anyway, it was interesting. That Lexus. Oh, I didn't talk about the Lexus, the TX55. TX5. This is why we used to edit. TX550H Plus. Man, that's another one. If I had to just pick something, it might not be the Ram. It might have been the Lexus. If I wanted something to drive cross country, it's got the Mark Levinson sound system. I mean, just what a thing. Just a transportation device, if not the most exciting thing.
Sounds a really good range of vehicles that you drove then. So
it was. I'm so glad I got the chance to do it, and can't wait to do it again. And again, the cherry on top was getting to drive on a press drive with Chebacheta. So, the story with that, if I haven't shared with you, when I was like 12 years old, I was obsessed with Car and Driver, and I couldn't wait till that magazine got home, and I'd sit and I'd read it with my bowl of cereal after school on the carpet on the floor probably. And I wrote and I said, what would it take to become a writer for your magazine someday? And
wow.
I don't know who wrote me back. I think it was him, but he basically said you need to either get a journalism degree or become an automotive engineer. And I was in middle school and I was or a podcaster, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Which, I mean, how foreign that would have been, back then. But I knew I wasn't going to be able to earn a degree in either of those fields based on the grades that I was getting at the time. And so it's funny, all these years later, that's how we met up. But yeah, anyway, so
that's cool.
Can't wait to get you into town for Pikes Peak. You sent me over a list of 10 realistic sports cars you have to drive before you die, Dan. And I think this came out of, I've really been singing the praises of the Lotus Elise lately. I went on a drive with a guy in an Exige, and that got my gears turning. I had a good friend when I was younger, roommate, who bought a Lotus Elise when they were new and spent a lot of time with it. I was a smaller person then, but just really enjoyed the hell out of that car. And manual steering, manual brakes, there's not a car made like that any longer, and there never will be. So for me, that's one of my my bucket list, gotta drive before you die cars. I see that's right at the top of your list.
Yeah, I've got a buddy who's just bought one in the UK, and I'm going to see him at Goodwood. But that got me thinking, like, what are the cars from our youth, or not necessarily new cars, but cars that we should at least have on our CVs, resumes, to say, hey, yeah, I've had a spin in that one. So kind of came up with a bit of a list, but it'd be interesting to see how many of those cars you guys have driven, and what did you think? Did it make the list, or actually was it a disappointment?
Would you want to go down the list?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's, so this is in no particular order. We talked about the Elise a little bit, but the very early Golf GTI, so like Mark 1 to 3. So, when it first came out and they stayed for the first few generations, a little bit boxy, didn't they? Did you guys get to drive any of those?
I did, and it makes a great noise and a great experience, but it's probably the slowest race, isn't it, to 0 to 60.
Yeah.
Great,
And was
great
that the
experience.
original?
Sorry?
Was it the original, or was it an early one, or what was the time frame?
It was an early one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
I've
That's,
never driven one. I grew up with that era of Volkswagen in my house. That's what we had. We had the Rabbit and the Dasher and all that, but they were diesels, so very much not the GTI. So if you think the GTI was slow, Alan, you should go get yourself a
right.
a diesel a Volkswagen of the era. So
I just think
I've
like
not
when you
driven. Maybe
drive-
I'm missing out.
when you drive them back then, you go, oh, it's amazing, it's exciting. And then you go then through time, you drive modern cars, and then you have this nostalgic experience, and you go back and do it again. You're like, was I really excited about this back then? And
Yeah,
you're doing this with the steering wheel to try and counter the bushing energy, and yeah, it's still pretty cool though. The smell, the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
Any smiles on your faces? I guess that's the other thing, isn't it? And it's like, did they put a smile on your face? And for me, I think the next one we've all driven, but a manual 911. So obviously, Alan, you've got the brand spanking new PDK one, but an older 911. Did you guys get to spend much time in any of those?
I've had a 996. That was a manual. That
Nice.
was that was an experience.
Yeah, and for me, the only one I've owned was a 997 Carrera S, and car that grew on me. I knew that I wanted a 911. I knew I wanted a Porsche. I wanted a 911, and I remember being a little disappointed, like when I went for the test drive. But after owning it for a year or two, it grew on me, and then I got it. Right, I understood why it was so good. Didn't
I'd
jump
like to
out at me.
expand that. I'd like to expand it a little bit more. Obviously, you said Porsche 911, but I've got the 986 Boxster S, and that's manual. And I still I do get a smile on the dial when I drive that, because I come out of a couple of corners here, and I've got it in a certain gear and just hold it and get out drifting nicely out of the corner. So yeah, it's good to have that control over the transmission.
Is that actually a more fun car to drive than your new 992?
Do you
Not talking about
know?
performance, but just joy.
I'm gonna say it's different, and I think I have to say that to justify the purchase of the new car to myself. But when I did go back into it to take it to get it washed the other day, I came back and I thought, wow, that still cuts. It's still a great car, So
Yeah, very good.
Was it-
Very good.
Yeah. What's next?
I've got not the current one, but maybe one or two generations behind the Corvette. So I used to rent them from Hertz. Hertz used to let you rent these things.
The yellow one.
The yellow Hertz Corvette is one of the best cars. If you're on a vacation, you're doing a road trip somewhere that you're not used to, getting in one of those and the V8. Have you guys driven them?
I have. That C5, I think, is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
no,
Yeah,
I've
I-
not driven.
I-
Sorry, I've not driven, but I've been in the passenger seat, and it was an experience. It was pretty good.
It's amazing any of those stayed on the road, right? That was a lot of car to just, I think you had to be 25. So that was the distinction between that and like the Hyundai Elantra that was parked next to it. I remember that. I went somewhere with my wife. I don't even remember where we were. They had it at the airport. And they had like, lights shining on it. Like it was on a podium, like it was this big deal. And I remember getting in, had like 40,000 miles. Like speakers on one side didn't work for the stereo. It was pretty beaten up, and it was cold and rainy the whole time we had it. But in the brief periods when it wasn't raining, we took the top off, and it was magic, right? Like it was 400 horsepower, if I recall, the C5, that Hertz car, right? Terrible chrome wheels, everything else, but just as a thing you could just go in and probably pay $250 a day for. It was pretty good. Would I buy one? No, but
I got a guilty pleasure thing going on with them.
yeah,
Maybe it's an itch you need to scratch and then move off quickly. But I don't know. I'm thinking about it. But a Mustang rental car So it doesn't necessarily need to be the V8, but just a rental car, so you
Sure.
could do whatever the hell you wanted with it versus a car that you own.
You go first, Alan.
So I did, and it was an auto, and I think that's what kind of took the shine off for me,
Yeah.
is to have something like that. I I know I'm a big advocate for like PDK and good automatic transmissions. I just didn't quite get the exhilaration. It was a great Pacific Coast Highway cruiser. I think that's what it was for me.
Yeah.
It was convertible, and that's what we got it for, and yeah, so it was fun.
Yeah.
I rented one here in Denver for my wife and a group of her friends who were visiting to go to Red Rocks, and I thought, oh, a Mustang convertible, that'd be a fun car to tailgate, right?
Yeah.
And when it showed up, it was a V8, and I took it out because I had to take it out. I don't even know if I would have taken the V6 out, but I took the V8 out, and at the time, I had my base 718 Cayman, and despite all the power and the noise, it still didn't seem quite as fast as the base Cayman. Like, I don't know where there's Porsche horsepower and then there's like Mustang horsepower. Sorry, Lindsay. A great thing, just not my personality, a late model, GT Mustang convertible. It was black on black, cool thing, but I didn't really wasn't what I wanted to necessarily be seen in. Sorry, again, it just wasn't for me.
It was a bit of a weird time for Mustangs. Like, they're obviously coming back now, and we can talk about the new one soon, but
yeah,
it was an odd time. They didn't
it was an
quite...
odd time.
Yeah.
And this is also the car that there was a threat of hail. And so I remember trying to get at least half of this Mustang into our garage, and in the process, not knowing the size of the Mustang and tapping the front end of my Cayman, which from that point forward had these two little marks from the license plate that I could never not see every time I went out to drive the car. It never even hailed. That's the worst part, right? But
This is turning into group therapy. And
It is, yeah. And we all
it was one of the reasons I traded it in.
Well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny.
Well, let's move on quickly then, shall we? The original V8 Aston Martin Vantage manual.
I haven't, and I really
haven't
want
either.
to. Yeah.
I've always
I rented
admired
one.
them.
Rented one for a weekend. They're not a quick car. There's a trick where you can take a fuse out, and they've got these butterfly exhausts. So you take the fuse out, and you get the full noise the whole time, and it's an experience. It's not a quick car, but it's a great experience. Get on it, gents.
What a beautiful car, right? Just a beautiful thing. And I was one of those people that kind of shed a tear when Aston went to their new design language, right? I know they had squeezed everything they could have out of that, those early Vantages, and the Vantage looked just like the DB and everything else, but they were just such, and continue to be just such attractive vehicles.
So
that seems to be the consensus. Yeah.
We have an Aston Martin dealer literally 2 mile away from my house, and they had a DB9 there and a DBR9S, I think, as well. And as we cruised past, I said to my son, "Tell me that's a beautiful looking car."
Yeah.
And he went, "Yeah, I appreciate it, but it's an old man's car." And I'm like,
Interesting.
"Oh, cuts."
Is that why we all want one? Is that?
Yeah, maybe it's putting it in our bracket. So
I was always disappointed when the replacement came out. I thought the headlights were a little small and looked like a little beady-eyed. That was never a problem in that original Vantage. So.
Yeah, the original, I think, is a future classic. I got to drive the V12 one as well once.
Ooh, now that's a special car.
That's a lot of power under your clutch.
Yeah.
When you're. But I would settle for a V8, and the V8 one, just the noise. As long as it's a soft top, you can drive anywhere and just, again, have a smile on your face.
Yeah. Although, aren't they kind of like Mustang V8s? I mean, in a way.
I think they're a better noise. Just
Yeah.
the noise.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
the oral experience, I think. Yeah. But, I think you guys need to get in and have a drive of one. This is very extreme now. I'm going for a bit of a boy racer car, and it's the Subaru WRX STI, which for me, I don't know why Subaru have decided not to do an STI model. It's one of these cars where there's like a cult following, especially in Seattle. But did you guys get behind the wheel of an STI at any point?
no, I haven't, but I always wanted to. Yeah,
WRX
big
is-
fan of watching them on TV. So
Yeah, sorry, Alan, same. I've never driven an STI of any variant, which is probably, turning, part of my my car guy card here, but I have driven a couple WRXs. I see the appeal. Like a WRX or an STI would be great, just all arounder. Here in Colorado. I never really. Yeah, again, I can't say because I haven't driven the STI. I don't know. It's after having driven so many Porsches and stuff, maybe I wasn't the right demographic. But what about you? Because you've got some time with.
Yeah, a few.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
when I was quite young, I drove a track day, and it was a Ferrari 360 Modena. But to warm you up, they put you in an STI,
Okay.
and you were actually lapping quicker in the STI at the
Really?
start because it was an easier car to drive
Sure.
fast.
Sure.
And then obviously when the time I spend at Dirtfish, they have STIs, and but they're not the sort of STI you can go buy from the street because of suspension and brakes and all the aids being taken off. But I think they're just the road versions. I think they're a very easy car to drive quickly and get a good experience in.
Do you know this list is it's actually a list for something else as well. Like you could pretty much, and I know we've got a few more to talk about on the list, but every one of them is an investment. If you
point.
buy any one
Yeah,
of these and
absolutely.
you park it up and it's in obviously good condition, looked after,
Yeah.
garaged, they're only going up in value. So I think
Yeah.
you've struck on a good formula here.
And
Yeah,
I don't think there's
that'd be
anything more expensive than about $80,000 on this list. So there's that.
No, I tried to make it like the real person or the working person's list. I didn't want
Yeah.
to put lots of Ferraris on here and stuff like that, just because we know that that's not necessarily realistic. But we've talked a little bit about the next one, but the Miata or the MX-5 as we know it in the UK.
Yeah.
You obviously did the RF, which was the. Do you think that's the sweet spot?
It's hard to say. I'd like to go back and drive an NA. My dad had a couple of NAs when I was growing up, and I never remember those as being like too light on power necessarily. I'm sure in retrospect they were, but I remember a certain sort of like mechanical, I don't know, edge to those cars that I think was lost in this latest one. The latest one just seemed a little too light, a little too, maybe just a half step removed from like true sort of, oneness, right? That I think the NAs had. I think it's lost a little something, but definitely bucket list cars. You got to drive them because again, kind of like the Elise, they don't make cars like this anymore. Even the the BRZ or the 86. That's not quite the same formula. A Boxster, it just has so much more power or whatever out of the box. So, no pun intended. So yeah, I think it belongs on this list. Would I ever buy one again? Probably not. But it'd be a fun press car to have for the weekend to like drive from Denver down to Santa Fe or something, right?
Nice. Yeah. Alan, have you spent much time in them?
I've done a little bit of driving and I rate them. I think they're a fantastic car. Again, going up in value. I think they're probably gone up for a couple of grand or maybe even £1,000, a couple of years ago. And now they're sitting up, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, good investment.
Yeah.
I think finding a good one is going to be tough, right? Like because they were cheap cars,
lots of
right?
ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean
There was
NA
an
and that British racing green, by the way.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good color, isn't it? That's a very good color. The next one's another itch I think I want to scratch at some point, and it's an early manual Audi R8.
Yeah. Well,
What
they've
size
already
engine?
come up. Yeah. Is that the
Yeah.
4.2 or the?
Well, the 4.2 I think is realistic. I think just the V10 now is, that's unicorn money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But have you guys driven the R8, the original? Am I going to be disappointed if I get in one?
I have a friend who has one. He loves it.
Yeah?
He shopped. He found it. I don't know whether his love is blind on that one for him, but he shopped. He found it, and he thinks it's amazing. He thinks
And it's a
up there with a variety of different Porsches. He loves it. So
gated manual car.
yeah.
Okay. See, I've never driven that. I've only ever driven I guess it was the R-Tronic, right? So I think the later
Yeah.
S-Tronic is pretty well regarded, but the early R-Tronic I think was a single clutch, almost like an F1 transmission. Not the best transmission, but they have a great sound. Even the V8, even if it's got a good exhaust on it. I don't know about in the UK, but in the States, those were $40,000-$50,000 cars for a while, and now they've come up. Now they're $60,000, $70,000 cars. Even the
really?
automatics, the early cars. So it's been a weird one. And I think one of the things that people are realizing is that was like pure uncut Audi design. right? Much
Yeah.
like the original TT, right? Those blades were just like outrageous at the time. And then, in subsequent years, they sort of toned that stuff down. They dialed out what made it unique. When the R8 came out, and for that matter, the TT, and I think you could almost put the TT on this list, if not as an experience, but as an investment. There was just, they look like concept cars, right? And that R8, I think, still kind of does, and maybe looks better than the than the last version before they killed it. So it's so fun car. At least the one that I got to drive recently, which was an R-Tronic, I guess, V8, but no, it wouldn't sway me away from a 911.
Yeah.
So
I remember seeing one of the first times, I think it was the prototype, was in Iron Man. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Kind of a few dreams of being Tony Stark there, driving your R8. Let's go to the final one on the list, shall we? And this is it's an early but not an original. So the BMW M3, either the E36, and I saw a video with Jason Camisa on the E36, which is really good, and we'll put it in the show notes, or the E46. So this is the Generation 2 or the Generation 3 M3.
Alan,
Yes.
gonna take this?
I'll take any of them. I've done a little bit of driving in them, but nothing major. And I'm a BMW fan. I think they get a tough rap, even like the more modern ones. But if I was to ever do some track stuff, I would go to anything from the BMW lineup. It's just a great track day car. It's well engineered. Yeah, great cars.
Which one would you take, you think, 36 or the 46?
I'd probably do the 36.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Yeah. I remember when that came out, and it was on the cover again, Car and Driver. There was a Dakar yellow one, and they basically, I think the headline was like the second coming, right? Like it was such a highly regarded car, and I think the hit in the States was that it only had 240 horsepower versus the 300 plus horsepower, whatever it was in Europe at the time. So that must be really something special. So I'm looking at this through the lens of the the lesser engined car, but I just thought that was such a, think of the car that replaced, right? Like the E30.
Yeah.
And what a sea change that was over the E30,
step
right?
change. Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think now in retrospect, people are realizing there were a lot of like eco-friendly materials and wiring harnesses and this kind of stuff that kind of handicapped that era of BMW. But but then I also have a soft spot for the E46, and even like the 330 ICI of that era, just fantastic cars,
Yeah.
I was driving a 2001 A4 2.8 manual when that was out, and I had a girlfriend that had a 330 CI manual coupe, and the BMW was so much better in every way, and they were like basically the same price, right? And the BMW was just would just run circles around the Audi. And so I haven't spent much time in the M3, but I imagine it's peak BMW, right?
So Dan, you had on the list. You spent some time in them, or?
Yeah, I used to have an E46 M3 cab. That was cool.
Down.
Yeah, that was a great car, and that was my daily, which was super cool. The Camisa story is interesting because the second generation M3 was never destined to come to the US. So the BMW Owners Club of North America got their members to write to BMW North America and said, we deserve this car, we will buy this car, bring this car to North America. So they did. I'll find that video because it's a really cool, as usual, Camisa does a great job.
Yeah.
But it's so originally it was never going to come. The other one that I think actually is a little bit underrated and actually undervalued right now is the Z3M, and not necessarily the coupe. The coupe is the better car, but the coupe is more expensive, whereas the convertible, like, no one really wants those at the minute. So I think that's a good one as well.
Well, and it's funny you mention that because that literally had both engines, right? That had the lesser engine, the 240 horse, and then the later ones had, I think it was I want to say 333, but I don't know if it was quite that much.
It's 321.
321 in that car.
Yeah.
I think it was 333 in the M3, right? But it was,
Right.
Yeah, right, okay. Well, I just saw one of these the other day. Tiny, tiny cars. You forget how small those are, right? And of course, you'd want the one with the bigger engine, but I think maybe the sweet spot is to get one with the 240 horsepower motor, because it's still a great car. And I guess I mentioned their size because, again, what car now can you get that much power in a car that small?
Yeah.
Right? That's good power now, So, yeah, I think still undervalued. Been a minute since I've driven one.
Yeah, I think we need to get driving, don't we, gents?
Yeah. I remember them being a very good drive. So, well,
So
Dan,
do we
I
have
know.
time to talk about the new Mustang GTD.
Sure. I mean, this is the one with all the aero, right?
It is such a weapon of a car. Like, just when you think they can't do any more with the Mustang, and hats off to Jim Farley. And listening to him on Matt Farah's podcast, Smoking Tire, recently, I didn't realize how much of a racer that guy is. So, he's definitely supporting positioning Ford well for the future for enthusiasts like us, and also partnering people like Multimatic that they do the dampers that are on the Ferrari Purosangue. They build the Mercedes, was it Project One cars? They've done obviously Ford GTs. It's a phenomenal. It's legitimate. It looks good. It's obviously priced, pretty chunky, but it's going to be some great PR moving forward for Ford, I think.
That's GT3 RS performance. Is that what we're talking about?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And some GT3 RS money as well. But
is it okay?
It looks really purposeful and intentional. So,
yeah. Well, they'll sell everyone, and that'll be a great investment, right? Like,
it's a weapon, isn't it? They said that they could have kept it to an IMSA standard and not had some of the stuff that's on the car, but they decided to over-engineer it so it was a better track car, even though it would mean that they'd have to take something off to race in IMSA. So yeah, it's a great approach, isn't it?
Hats off to Larry Holt and the Multimatic crew. That's an amazing car. Well done.
I got to dig more into that. It looks very compelling. Very cool car. Yeah. Hey, also hats off to Jay at Sheffield Watches. Dan, do you have yours?
Oh, noticed. Yeah.
Over there. But yes, it's arrived.
What a great guy with all these proceeds, going to where they're going. And also just a super cool watch. I've worn this thing since I got it. So maybe this will be my daily for a while. We'll see.
There you go. But, black and yellow.
Good on you, Jay. So, all right. Well, I know we need to wrap this up. So thank you, Dan. Thank you, Alan. Till next time for the Road Show.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.